December 1943. Admiral Bruce Fraser understood the arithmetic that would decide Britain's survival in Arctic waters. Every convoy to Murmansk carried 40,000 tons of tanks, aircraft, ammunition, supplies Stalin's armies desperately needed to keep bleeding Wehrmacht divisions on the Eastern Front. Soviet forces were destroying 200 German divisions yearly. Remove that pressure and Hitler could redeploy those divisions westward, making Allied invasion of Europe impossible. The calculation was brutally simple: protect the lifeline or lose the war. But protection came with costs Britain struggled to afford. Convoy JW-55B departed Loch Ewe December 20th, carrying 19 merchantmen loaded with 384 tanks, 127 aircraft, 15,000 tons of ammunition. The cargo's value, £4.2 million. Escorting them required destroyers, corvettes, cruisers Belfast, Norfolk and Sheffield, plus HMS Duke of York herself, a King George V class battleship costing £7.4 million to build. That single escort operation consumed naval assets, representing over £40 million in capital investment. Britain was spending £250 to protect every ton of cargo delivered. The German threat justified every pound. Scharnhorst prowled Norwegian fjords, a 32,000-ton battlecruiser armed with 9 11-inch guns capable of shredding merchant convoys in minutes. Germany had spent £12 million building her. In February 1941, Scharnhorst and sister ship Gneisenau sank 22 merchant vessels during a 2-month Atlantic raid, destroying £18 million in cargo, while both ships returned largely undamaged. Convoy PQ-17 in July 1942 demonstrated worse. False intelligence suggesting Scharnhorst was sortie caused escort to scatter. 24 of 35 ships sank, £35 million in cargo lost. No German battleship ever reached that convoy. The threat alone proved sufficient. Fraser needed to destroy Scharnhorst permanently. The strategic calculation was clear: lose one £7.4 million battleship, eliminating Germany's £12 million threat, and Britain gained ability to reduce convoy escorts by £8 million per operation. 20 successful convoys using reduced escorts would pay for Duke of York's entire construction cost. The trap Fraser designed reflected lessons learned from 3 years of naval warfare. Traditional doctrine called for battleship-on-battleship engagements fought in daylight, where superior gunnery decided outcomes. Fraser rejected this completely. December the 26th in Arctic waters provided barely 2 hours of twilight at midday. Scharnhorst's 9 11-inch guns matched Norfolk's 8 8-inch guns, outranged Belfast's 12 6-inch weapons, and could engage Sheffield on equal terms. In visual combat, the German battlecruiser held tactical advantage through superior firepower against cruisers, superior speed to escape Duke of York's heavier guns. At his conference with ship captains before the operation, Fraser outlined his plan precisely: intercept Scharnhorst at a position between the convoy and her Norwegian base, approach to within 12,000 yards in Arctic night, illuminate with star shell, open fire using fire control radar. The plan required perfect coordination between widely separated forces, continuous radio communication despite German direction finding, and absolute confidence that British radar could deliver decisive advantage in darkness. Fraser's solution was technological. Duke of York carried Type 284 radar for gunnery control and Type 273 for surface search. The 284 could detect targets at 29,700 yards and provide accurate range data for blind firing. The 273 picked up Scharnhorst's superstructure at 45,500 yards, well beyond visual range. The Type 284 cost £75,000 per battleship, 3 Spitfire fighters worth. Installation required specialist technicians, constant maintenance, operator training taking months. Germany could have built 2 U-boats for what Britain spent equipping Duke of York with radar, but the return was transformative. Radar-directed fire eliminated spotting delays. The Type 284 measured range electronically with 50-yard accuracy at 30,000 yards, feeding data directly to mechanical computers controlling gun elevation. Duke of York could fire accurate salvos blind, in total darkness, in conditions where Scharnhorst's optical rangefinders were useless. Britain had invested years developing supporting infrastructure. The Admiralty's 1943 radar budget, £3.8 million, exceeded Germany's entire naval electronics expenditure. Kriegsmarine radar remained inferior, not because German engineers were incompetent, but because Germany allocated electronics capacity elsewhere: aircraft radars, submarine detection, flak batteries. Britain concentrated on naval systems. Scharnhorst's SeaTact radar was functionally blind by comparison. The system could detect surface targets, but couldn't provide the precision range and bearing data needed for accurate fire control. German doctrine relied on optical rangefinders, superb equipment in daylight, nearly useless in Arctic night. When Norfolk's 8-inch shells struck Scharnhorst's foremast early in the engagement, destroying her radar antenna, Rear Admiral Eric Bay lost even basic detection capability. The battlecruiser was fighting blind against opponents who could see perfectly. The radar loss had cascading tactical effects. Bay couldn't accurately determine range to targets, couldn't detect approaching destroyers until visual range, couldn't know when British forces were converging on his position. Every tactical decision was based on incomplete information. Every course change was gambling that unseen opponents weren't waiting in the darkness ahead. Modern naval warfare demanded information as much as firepower. Scharnhorst had neither. The economics of radar development illustrated differing national priorities. Britain had invested £8 million in radar research between 1935 and 1943, treating electronics as force multiplier that compensated for numerical inferiority. The investment paid dividends across all services. RAF Fighter Command's victory in the Battle of Britain relied on chain-home radar stations. Coastal Command's U-boat kills required airborne radar. The Royal Navy's surface actions increasingly depended on radar fire control. Germany spent comparable sums on U-boat production instead, betting that submarines offered better return on investment than surface fleet modernization. Between 1940 and 1943, Germany built 740 U-boats at roughly £55,000 each, £40 million total investment. Those submarines sank tremendous tonnage but faced increasing losses as Allied radar-equipped escorts dominated the Atlantic. By December 1943, that decision was proving catastrophic. British radar-equipped escorts were crushing U-boats. Now radar-equipped heavy units were hunting Germany's last operational northern battlecruiser. The strategic calculation had failed. Submarines couldn't win if surface ships couldn't survive long enough to tie down Allied naval forces. The hunt began December 25th when Luftwaffe reconnaissance spotted convoy JW-55B. German Naval Group North analyzed intelligence. 19 merchant ships, estimated speed 8 knots, escort strength unknown. Hitler's standing orders were clear: attack weakly defended convoys. Grand Admiral Dönitz authorized Operation Ostfront. Scharnhorst would sortie, find the convoy, destroy it. British codebreakers at Bletchley Park had been reading Kriegsmarine communications for months. Ultra-decrypts gave Fraser Scharnhorst's departure time, course, and intentions within hours. This intelligence advantage cost Britain £2 million annually, but was priceless. Fraser could position forces optimally, spring an ambush. Scharnhorst sortied from Altafjord 1900 hours Christmas evening with 5 destroyers. Bay's orders, find and destroy JWW-55B, Intelligence indicated weak escort. What Bay didn't know, Fraser had positioned 3 forces tracking him through ultra-intercepts. Vice Admiral Burnett's Force 1 with cruisers Belfast, Norfolk, Sheffield shadowed the convoy. Fraser's Force 2, Duke of York, Jamaica, 4 destroyers, had departed Iceland December the 23rd to intercept Scharnhorst's return course. The convoy's destroyer screen was reinforced to 12 versus normal 6. Britain had positioned nearly £25 million in warships to protect 19 merchant vessels carrying £4.2 million in cargo. The numbers only made sense strategically. Lose enough convoys and the Eastern Front collapses. 0840 hours, December the 26th. Belfast Type 273 radar detected a surface contact at 35,000 yards. The radar operator reported the contact to the bridge. Burnett ordered course changed to close range while Sheffield and Norfolk manoeuvred into firing positions. At 15,000 yards, Burnett was certain Scharnhorst. 0921 hours, range 12,000 yards. Burnett ordered star shells fired. 3 burning magnesium rounds burst 3,000 feet above the ocean, casting harsh white light. Lookout saw Scharnhorst clearly. Massive grey hull, turrets trained fore and aft, completely unaware. Belfast's 12 6-inch guns opened fire. Each shell cost £8. Belfast fired 43 rounds in the first engagement. Norfolk and Sheffield joined the bombardment. Norfolk's 3rd salvo found its mark. An 8-inch shell struck Scharnhorst's foremast, destroying the radar antenna, killing 3 operators. Aboard Scharnhorst, Bay understood immediately. The battlecruiser was blind. Without radar, his optical rangefinders operated in Arctic twilight, minus 15 degrees Celsius, snow squalls limiting visibility to 8,000 yards. Scharnhorst returned fire. Her 4th salvo hit Norfolk amidships, destroying X-turret, killing 7 men. A 2nd shell hit Norfolk's superstructure, destroyed her radar, killed 7 more. But Bay couldn't see his hits through smoke and darkness. At 0956 hours, he turned southeast, using superior speed to disengage. Burnett pursued, but couldn't close. For 3 hours, Belfast tracked Scharnhorst on radar, while the German battlecruiser pulled away. Sheffield developed engine problems. Norfolk, damaged, struggled in heavy seas. At one point, Belfast was pursuing alone, a 10,300-ton cruiser chasing a 32,000-ton battlecruiser that outgunned her 4-1. But Belfast wasn't trying to sink Scharnhorst. She was keeping contact, feeding position reports to Fraser, herding the German ship toward Duke of York's guns. Fraser tracked the pursuit through constant radio updates from Belfast. His own Type 273 radar picked up Scharnhorst at 1617 hours, range 45,500 yards, 25 miles. The contact appeared on the cathode ray tube as a bright pip against the green phosphorescent background. The radar operator called out the contact, measured the bearing and range, fed the information to the gunnery plot. Fraser let the range close. Duke of York's machinery pushed 110,000 shaft horsepower through turbines, driving the battleship at 24 knots. At 29,700 yards, the Type 284 gunnery radar acquired Scharnhorst. Mechanical computers calculated firing solutions, target speed, bearing, range rate. At 1648 hours, range 10,900 yards, Fraser gave the order, open fire. The first salvo was devastating. Duke of York's 10 14-inch guns fired simultaneously. The 1,590-pound shells arced across 6 miles of ocean. Time of flight, 32 seconds. The first salvo straddled perfectly. Lieutenant Commander Kenneth Cobley, Duke of York's gunnery director officer, watched through his director sight. Radar gave perfect range data. The mechanical computers adjusted aim. 30 seconds later, the second salvo fired. This salvo hit Scharnhorst's forward turret, putting 3 11-inch guns out of action. The shell penetrated the turret face, killed 11 men, started fires that spread to ammunition handling below. Damage control teams flooded the magazine, preventing catastrophic explosion. Scharnhorst attempted return fire. Her remaining 2 turrets, 6 11-inch guns, swung toward Duke of York. 2 shells found their mark. The first struck Duke of York's foremast, severing wireless aerials and critically cutting the cable connecting Type 284 radar to gunnery control below. The radar went dead. The second shell hit the superstructure, wounding 3 men. For 4 minutes, Duke of York fought blind. Then Lieutenant Harold Bates, the electrical officer, climbed the foremast in darkness, in Arctic wind, in force 8 gale, coating every surface with ice. He reached the Type 284 antenna, found the severed cable, reconnected the wires using emergency jumpers, restarted the stabilizer gyroscope. 4 minutes after the hit, Type 284 was working again. The disparity in fire control was now overwhelming. Duke of York fired 52 salvos during the engagement. 31 straddled or hit, 60% effectiveness. Scharnhorst fired 27 salvos, scored 2 hits, 7% effectiveness. The difference wasn't seamanship or courage, it was technology. The technological disparity wasn't just radar. Duke of York's 14-inch guns were recent designs, manufactured to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch, capable of consistent accuracy at extreme range. Scharnhorst's 11-inch weapons dated from the mid-1930s, excellent guns for their era, but lacking the precision engineering of newer British designs. This reflected broader industrial realities. Britain maintained specialized armament factories capable of producing extremely high-quality naval guns at enormous cost. Germany, resource-constrained and focused on land warfare, accepted slightly lower quality in naval weapons to conserve manufacturing capacity. 18-20 hours. Duke of York's 13th salvo achieved what Fraser needed most. A 14-inch shell penetrated Scharnhorst's belt armor at extreme range, exploded in the No. 1 boiler room, and severed high-pressure steam lines. The battlecruiser's speed dropped from 31 knots to 10. She was crippled, unable to escape, helpless against the destroyers Fraser ordered forward for torpedo attack. HMS Savage, Saumarez, Scorpion and Norwegian destroyer Stord closed to 3,000 yards through heavy seas that made torpedo runs extraordinarily dangerous. Waves crashed over destroyer bows, spray coated gun directors, but the ships pressed forward. They fired 28 torpedoes in coordinated waves. 11 found Scharnhorst. The underwater explosions tore massive holes in her hull, flooding compartments, breaking structural members, twisting the keel. Duke of York and Jamaica resumed firing at 10,400 yards, so close that star shells hung above Scharnhorst like a chandelier, in one witness's description. Belfast added her remaining guns from the north. The destroyers, Opportune, Virago, Musketeer, and Matchless maneuvered for second torpedo runs, launching 19 more torpedoes into the crippled battlecruiser. 1945 hours, December 26, 1943. Scharnhorst capsized and sank, position 72 degrees 16 minutes north, 28 degrees 41 minutes east, her propellers still turning as she went under. 1,932 crew died. 36 survived, plucked from water so cold that men lasted minutes before hypothermia killed them. British casualties totaled 18 killed, mostly aboard destroyer Saumarez, which had taken an 11-inch shell hit during her torpedo run. The final accounting revealed the battle's strategic mathematics. Scharnhorst represented Germany's last operational capital ship in northern waters. Her loss removed the surface threat to Arctic convoys completely. Tirpitz remained in Norwegian fjords, but British intelligence knew she'd been crippled by midget submarine attack in September. Until Tirpitz could be repaired, if she could be repaired, convoys could run without heavy battleship escorts. The economic impact cascaded through 1944's convoy operations. Previously, each Arctic convoy required battleship escort, tying up Duke of York, Anson, or Howe for 10 to 14 days per mission. Those ships cost £350 per day just in fuel oil at cruising speed, before calculating crew wages, ammunition, maintenance. With Scharnhorst destroyed, battleship escorts became unnecessary. Britain could reduce convoy protection to cruisers and destroyers, freeing capital ships for operations against Japan or Mediterranean duties. The numbers told the story. Between January and May 1944, 14 Arctic convoys delivered 237 merchant ships carrying 1.2 million tons of supplies to Murmansk, protected by cruiser-destroyer screens that cost roughly 60% less per convoy than previous battleship escort operations. The savings, approximately £2.8 million across those 5 months, nearly equaled Duke of York's original construction cost. Scharnhorst's destruction paid for itself in freed resources within 6 months. Admiral Fraser's decision to use radar-directed night fighting had worked because Britain possessed technology Germany couldn't match and doctrine traditional naval thinking would have rejected. The engagement lasted 10.5 hours from first contact to Scharnhorst's sinking. Duke of York fired 446 rounds of 14-inch ammunition, each shell costing £65. The cruisers expended 2,195 shells of various calibers. The destroyers launched 55 torpedoes at £2,400 each. Total ammunition expenditure, approximately £165,000. The cargo in convoy JW-55B, which reached Murmansk intact, was valued at £4.2 million, making the ammunition cost barely 4% of the cargo protected. But the strategic value exceeded simple cost-benefit analysis. Scharnhorst's destruction meant every subsequent Arctic convoy required less escort, freeing British capital ships for operations elsewhere. It meant Stalin's armies received supplies without interruption through spring 1944, sustaining Soviet offensives that destroyed Wehrmacht divisions Germany couldn't replace. It meant Hitler's northern naval threat, which had consumed substantial Royal Navy resources since 1939, was finally eliminated. Fraser had achieved a strategic victory that cascaded through every theatre where British forces operated. But the real victory wasn't economic. Fraser had demonstrated that modern naval warfare required integration of radar, radio communications, and coordinated multi-ship tactics more than individual ship superiority. Scharnhorst was a magnificent vessel, faster than Duke of York, more heavily armoured than the cruisers, built to standards that reflected German engineering excellence. None of that mattered when she couldn't see her opponents, and they could see her perfectly. Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz understood immediately. His assessment after the battle: surface ships are no longer able to fight without effective radar equipment. That single sentence described the end of traditional naval warfare as clearly as any official doctrine change. Ships were now weapons platforms subordinate to the electronic systems that let them detect and engage enemies. The Navy, with better radar, would win regardless of gun caliber or armor thickness. December 1943 proved something that accountants and admirals both recognized: the most expensive weapon isn't always the most effective. Duke of York cost £7.4 million. Her Type 284 radar cost £75,000, 1% of the ship's total price. That 1% made the difference between victory and defeat. The lesson was clear. In modern warfare, electronics and coordination matter more than displacement tonnage or main battery size. Convoy JW-55B reached Murmansk December 30th. All 19 merchant vessels arrived safely. The supplies they delivered, 384 tanks, 127 aircraft, 15,000 tons of ammunition, 8,000 tons of fuel, kept 3 Soviet field armies fighting through January 1944. That cargo, protected by ships that cost millions and technology that cost thousands, contributed to Wehrmacht defeats that eventually forced Germany's attention away from the Atlantic. Fraser's victory proved that Britain could afford to win, not through building more ships than Germany, but by building smarter ships equipped with technology that turned tactical disadvantage into strategic dominance. The humble radar set, derided by some traditionalists as unnecessary complication, had killed the last German capital ship that threatened Arctic convoys. That was worth substantially more than any 11-inch gun ever